Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another archetype video. Today, for the first time, I'm going to talk about villain archetypes on this channel. That's an untapped topic that we really haven't delved into. And if you caught the writing stream we did last night, one of the misconceptions people often have about writing a villain is that the villain has to think they're the hero of their own story. They have to be understandable, even relatable in some way. And that is one way to write a villain, and it's a valid way to write a villain. But the problem is that's the only way people tend to write villains today. And that's very limiting in the types of stories that we receive and in the types of heroes that we get ultimately, because, you know, heroes are very defined by their villains, by the challenges that they face and have to overcome and have to adapt, and their heroics too. So we'll talk about some different types throughout this portion of the series. We started out the heroic archetypes series on the Trickster. I think that was the first one we did. So I'm going to talk about the Trickster as a villain this time around. Just to recap a little bit, some of the things we said about the basic Trickster archetype will still apply. We're just going to apply them to a villain now instead of a hero. The Trickster blurs boundaries. That's what a Trickster does for a society. Historically, this was important because, you know, you think about, if you go back and look at mythology and whatnot, you have a lot of trickster gods in some more kind of tribal societies. That's where they really are predominant. And this would make sense because if you had, let's see, you had like tribe A here, and they were very good at agriculture, just for example. This isn't, you know, exact, but, you know, they were really good at agriculture. And then you had tribe B over here, and they were really good at hunting. Well, in order to maintain their cultures, to maintain their identities as their tribes or whatever, they have to maintain a certain measure of exclusivity. They have to make, you know, close their borders and remain, you know, those tribes. If they just kept, you know, intermarrying or whatever, you know, they'd cease to be tribe A and tribe B, and they become tribe C. So if you're going to protect and maintain your culture and your way of life and your society for your generations, progeny and whatnot, then you need to kind of keep your culture close, keep your tribe close. At the same time, if you remain too exclusive, your culture stagnates. And that's, you know, in our little basic example there, let's say the agricultural tribe never let any other new people or information or other ways of life in, then they would just subsist on agriculture. And when the seasons weren't right for that, or weren't, you know, kind for that, they would starve. Or the people who were just hunting, they would lack their nutrition and vitamins, you know, from the vegetables or whatever. So they would tell these stories about trickster gods, and the trickster gods would always blur boundaries. They'd blur boundaries between, you know, in their stories, you'd read these old trickster stories, they'd blur boundaries between what it is to be masculine or feminine, what it is to be, honestly, good or evil sometimes. They would blur the boundaries between, you know, benevolence or malevolence. They wouldn't break the boundary or do away with it. They would just blur it a little bit. And that's what is useful, because the inspiration from that for these tribes would be to blur boundaries a little bit. The tricksters were always out on the road. You know, if you look at their stories, they're always traveling. They're always going out and meeting new people. So the tricksters would go out and find some information from another tribe or something like that in the stories. And that's what inspire the tribes themselves to do that. So they would let a little bit more information seep in, and they would have some more cultural influence from other tribes or whatever to grow their own. To, you know, it's like a gene pool that stagnates if you don't have any new information. Now, the trickster as a hero is not trying to do away with those borders either, but they are trying to expand our understanding of what it means, you know, to be this or that. So the great example of a trickster hero is Spider-Man. Spider-Man blurs the boundary just on the surface between spider and man, right? You know, moving like a spider as a man. Importantly, he blurs the boundary between boy and man, and especially, you know, often told or best told around the age of high school or college or whatever as a young man, and that time of you know, still maintaining some air of childlike fun, but also coming into responsibility and all of that. That Spider-Man's perfect, and he can even be written to question a little bit what it means to be a big masculine hero or something like that, you know, in terms of the way he moves and stuff like that. Talked about all of that in that video, so you can check out that for that bit of information. The villain, though, the trickster as a villain is trying to do away with these lines, specifically the line between good and evil. The trickster villain is trying to show the hero that nothing does matter, that their fight to bring justice to the world is pointless. That's what a trickster villain is trying to do ultimately. The trickster villain is a nihilist. The trickster villain does not need, in fact, when we get more backstory from them, it just tends to hurt the trickster villain. And the great example of a trickster villain is the Joker. It's not the only trickster villain. You've got trickster villains like Loki, the trickster himself, from the Flash stories and like that. And even when you have a great backstory for a trickster villain, someone like Loki, it's kind of thin in terms of motivation, right? I mean, Loki, to feel slighted, to feel like he should be king or whatever, it's kind of a Shakespearean sort of motivation or whatever. That's not really what you rely on. You rely on Loki, just the fact that he is greedy, that he does want it all for himself, that he wants to burn down Asgard. He just wants to blur those lines of descent and heritage and all of that. He just wants to burn it all down and have it for himself. The Joker is the perfect example of the trickster when done well. And I think that some great examples of the Joker done well, as much as I have issues with the Nolan films and their depiction of Batman in terms of his character, I have to admit they nailed the Joker in that Dark Knight. It's not my favorite portrayal of a Joker by any means, but they really did do well with the Joker in the terms that he just wants to watch the world burn, as Alfred tells him in that. And more importantly, and you see this a lot with Mark Hamill's Joker as well in the animated series, as well as the Arkham Asylum games and whatnot, which I think is probably the best interpretation of the Joker, hands down. But the idea that the Joker meets Batman, I've talked about this before in some videos, the Joker meets Batman, and here's somebody who fully believes in something just as much as the Joker doesn't believe in anything. The Joker believes nothing means anything. The world's just a joke. Let's burn it all down. There's no right or wrong. There's no sense of justice or whatever. But he meets Batman, and Batman's somebody who believes just as strongly as Joker disbelieves. And the Joker has to break Batman. That's his mission. He needs to stop Batman from believing, because Batman's strong faith in right and wrong and justice is a threat to Joker's nihilistic worldview. And I'll come back to this in a second. So the Joker's desperately trying to get Batman to kill. Desperately wants Batman to break his own rules. Desperately wants Batman to just realize that he's an idiot and that none of his little rules or little notions of good and evil and justice, none of it means anything. And won't Batman just please finally come over to the Joker's side? The interesting thing is, the fascinating thing from a storytelling angle is that if Batman were ever to do that, then the Joker wouldn't have any reason or purpose anymore. They define each other in that sense. Not that, Batman wouldn't have anything to do if the Joker wasn't around. He's got plenty of other villains to fight. But just in principle, the force, the idea of, if you didn't have this force, this villainous force, then the hero wouldn't need to go out and act, So you've got that kind of idea there. And that kind of blurring of the boundary for a villain is so important, and it's so resonant with people. And that's the thing I want to get to. Why is it so resonant? We live in an increasingly nihilistic society. That's what our culture is becoming. You are not allowed to talk, in most settings, you're not allowed to talk about anything like definitive right and wrong, anything beyond a vague sense of doing good or something like that. You're not allowed to talk religion or specifics in politics or whatever. In some cases, in some scenarios, that's fine. But we're doing away with that idea. People tend to scoff at anything beyond a moral relativist stance when it comes to what is right and what is wrong, to justice, to good and evil. There's always this idea of, well, you got to see it from the other side. Some level of that is good, right? That's where the trickster is useful. The trickster in society is useful to always question why we do things the way we do. Not to make us doubt ourselves and live in this perpetual circle of self-doubt, though, but to really make us certain about why we do the things we do, and why we have the certain laws that we have, why we have the certain aspirations and taboos and such. So, this sort of Socrates character in society is good to some degree. Question things and make sure they're the right things to do. But that's not where it stops with most people. And it comes from this sort of, immature idea. A lot of people, you see a lot of younger kids, teenager to college age, they just kind of think it's hip. They start that questioning thing, and it's cool now because they're nonconformist and they're the one who questions everything, and there's this sort of idea that they're somehow innately hip by doing that. But that's just a cycle toward madness. If you have nothing to hold on to, if you have nothing to grasp onto, any kind of sense of right and wrong or purpose, if all you're doing in the world is just questioning and doubting, you'll drive yourself crazy. I mean, these are the people that end up killing themselves one day. I mean, they are others, God forbid. So this is it's an ugly path, but it's the one that people tend to. But there's a comfort too in being the trickster, perpetual trickster, because then you never have to stand up and fight for anything. You never have to say, no, it's wrong to do this and it's right to do this, and here's why, and this is what I'm going to live my life in. Because then you've got rules, then you've got restrictions on your life, then you've got other people calling you square or whatever, for or a Puritan or whatever, for having these restrictions on your life and believing in this definite right and wrong. People will attack you if you stand up and say, no, I believe this, that this is right and this is wrong. You say that enough, people will start to come out of the woodworks to try and tear that belief from your hands. It makes people very uncomfortable. Unless you move in circles that have that same belief, people can't stand it, in general. And that's what's so appealing about the Batman Joker conflict, is that we relate to Batman and his struggle against the Joker, someone who just exists to mock him and exists to try to tear down that belief he has that he will not kill, that killing's bad, killing's wrong. He's going to put these villains in Arkham, he's going to rough them up a little bit, but he's not going to kill them. He's not going to take justice into his own hands. That's why it's such a boneheaded and short-sighted and just mind-boggling, stupid decision just to go out and have Batman kill like the Punisher or something like that. Completely misses the point of the character and how he resonates with people. And the same thing with the Joker. The Joker's a force. I've said this before. He's an elemental force of chaos. He is the trickster. The second you give the Joker a backstory and try to make us feel sorry for him, he's no longer a trickster. Now he's a sympathetic villain. Now he's just somebody who was mistreated. And yeah, we can kind of understand where he's coming from. And no, it's not right what he's doing, but we can empathize with him more. That is not a trickster. I know that it's been done in the comics now and then. People need to stop pretending, though, that The Killing Joke did that. The Killing Joke did not do that. The Killing Joke did something far more fascinating. It admitted over and over again that this story, this backstory that we're getting for the Joker in that comic, was not the definitive backstory. That was something that was he prefers his history to be multiple choice, he says. So he's just coming up with this story. Maybe parts of it are true, maybe parts of it are not true. The point is that that's the narrative that the Joker's weaved in his mind. That's the reason why nothing means nothing to him. That's the reason why it's pointless to go out and try and live a good life or a responsible life or have people that you care about and that are important to you or whatever, because, they'll get taken from you one way or the other. That was just, and it was important to have multiple scenarios like that in the Joker's head, because that's what would run through his head. In mythology of the trickster villain, who is vital in mythology because it teaches us how to stand up against limitless trickster force that we will come across in life. Those who just want to question everything to the point of not being able to cling to anything. That's what trickster villains teach us in stories, and seeing a hero fight that and overcome that teaches us that it is important to hold on to something. Whatever that is for you, you got to have some boundaries in your life. You can blur them, question them, make sure they're the right boundaries for you. But in the end, you got to have them. You got to cling to them, or else tribe A and tribe B just dissolve in your own beliefs and your own identities and your own values and ways to live your life are just out the window. And you, like I said, it's a descent into madness for yourself.